So I've decided to talk about my journey with post-concussive syndrome, or PCS for short. Um, I've been through a series of things recently medically that kind of have made me want to talk about it publicly. And I know when my accident first happened, I scoured the internet all over to find stories of hope, stories of healing, of restoration, of, hoping that people who have suffered have gone back to their old selves as the way they remember it. And my journey, I guess I'll do it in different segments because there's just so much to say, and I think that it's best to do it very extemporaneously, no edits. This is just my experience, and everyone has a different journey. And I want to say, if anyone who does suffer with PCS, I hope that you can find the courage to share your story and to let your voice be heard, because I'm kind of tired of only the outside world only understanding concussions through the sports world, and it can happen to anyone, and your symptoms can vary, just like with anything else. And so I guess I'll start with my story, how it came to be, and work my way up to present. I was on vacation last summer in 2014, and we went to a go-kart place. And while we were at the go-kart place, they explained, there were signs, but nothing really verbal that said, no running into each other or whatever. And I was there with a group of friends, and we decided to go go-karting. We had been hiking that day, and we were looking between mini golf and go-karting, and we decided to do the go-karts. I always think, like, what if we would have just did the mini golf? It would have just never happened. And but you just never know why things happen to you in the way that they do. And so while we were on the course, I'm a pretty cautious individual. And so, I'm pretty much going a decent pace, but not too fast, not too slow. And there was one man who kept speeding through the course. Now, the place never stopped him. They never kicked him off. And this man actually hit my friend's car. Her car spun out in inertia, and she ended up not being harmed. There was no direct impact without the spin out. And then, like, the guy was like, "Whoa, that was awesome," and kept going. Meanwhile, he didn't realize he could have caused serious injury. And after he did that, he continued to speed around. And everybody's comfort level with driving go-karts, it's different. And so also, you're controlling the brake with your left foot and the accelerator with your right. And so our natural instinct when we're in cars is to just do everything on the right foot. And so what happened was, he sped through another time, and a friend of mine was on the left and a friend of mine was behind me. The friend of mine on the left tried to slow down because he was putting everyone in jeopardy. And as a result, that friend ended up hitting the accelerator versus the brake, because you do everything on the right. And it's weird. In the moment, you're just trying to hit stop. Like, you're trying to stop, but you're still going, and it's scary, and you don't know, what's happening. And so you crash. And so, weirdly enough, the whole time, I didn't know what happened. I just knew I was hit. I didn't know who hit me. I assumed it was the crazy guy. And for me, he was the one responsible, because had he been held responsible for his behavior on the go-kart range, the series of events that followed would never have happened, because every single one of us has been in a go-kart before. But when you're forced to react very quickly and on the spot to keep everyone safe, sometimes you still have a mistake. And so I initially I really felt like, wow, outside of my body immediately, like, oh, my head, it hurts so horribly. And so I remember, the ride was over right after the hit. And I was the first person back into like the place where you pull in. And as soon as I stood up, I felt like weird, just really off. So we went back to where we were staying in our cabin. I took a shower, had a little sip of wine, and took a nap. And when I woke up from the nap, I just felt like I was standing on the outside of myself, almost like when you see movies and you see like the angel and the demon. It was almost like me standing on the outside of myself, looking at myself, but feeling like, wow, like something's off. And my head wouldn't stop hurting. I took Motrin after Motrin, and I took another sip of wine, and it still wouldn't go away. And I started to just feel really loopy. And a friend of mine works at a concussion, well, at the time worked at a concussion clinic. I said, you don't think you can get a concussion from a go-kart accident, do you? And she said, you might have one. If I were you, I would just lay down, no TV, no nothing, no phone, no reading. I had a couple of books that I took on the trip with me and magazines so that I could keep myself occupied. But as it turns out, I wasn't able to read the duration of the trip. And so that night, I wanted to watch a movie with everybody, but I still wasn't feeling the greatest. And the gentleman I was seeing at the time, I remember calling him and letting him know what happened. And needless to say, I'm not seeing that person anymore because of the dismissal of the seriousness of my injury and the abandonment after. But that'll be for another day, because it's all coming out. It's all coming out. I have to get it out. And so I went back in and took a nap, and the next day I decided to go to bed. And the next morning, my friend who I shared the room with, she said, "Okay, Maya, how do you feel?" And I woke up and I said, "Oh, I'm okay, But as soon as I stood up, the room started to spin. My mouth immediately got watery from nausea, and my head, again, the continual banging and just feeling like outside of my body. And so from there, I said, I'm going to take a shower, because I was raised like, if you don't feel well, get up, take a shower, and see how you feel. Maybe things will feel better. And I said, I'll see how I feel after. If I still don't feel quite right, at noon, we'll go to urgent care or to the emergency room. And time ticked by, and I helped make breakfast, and I was really trying hard to not overdo it, but I could just feel something was off. And so we ended up going to the urgent care, and they were really, really thorough. I mean, the experience at the urgent care was actually beautiful, and the doctors were so caring, and I really needed that experience to be the one that I had, because I don't know if I could have handled anything more. And at that moment, they did enough where they said, you definitely have a concussion. If you feel anything more tonight, you need to go to the emergency room. And when you get home, you need to see your primary care doctor. And I was just reeling, and here's what you'll need to do. And all I could think was, having a career in which if you don't work, you don't eat, there's no sick days, there's no PTO, there's nothing like that. And so all I could think was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to not work? Because they were like, you probably will have to take about a week off just to rest. And I'm like, a week off? What am I going to do? Wait until you find out how long it actually took, but that's later. And so I went back to the cabin, and, we had dinner, and it was a beautiful dinner. And we laughed, and we listened to each other's voicemail and how we sounded, and like what our work voices sounded like. And it was fun. But that feeling and that out-of-bodiness was still there. And we were set to come back home the next day. And we drove home, and I was set to take 2 people that day, and I was just too sick. It was the actual holiday, and actually the next day I was scheduled to take 2, and I was just too sick. I came home and straightened my room up a little after traveling and having things about unpacked, and got into bed. And I just remember on the ride home, on the way up, I always tally, and I had perfect vision, like perfect, and I always will keep track of the toll, and I would say, okay, how much it'll be, once we get where we're going. And so on the way home, I still had the GPS, and I like try to keep up with the GPS to make sure the driver is okay. And I was okay at that point. But I went to grab the ticket out of the top of this thing. What is that called? Visor, right. The top of the visor. And I went to look at it. And for the life of me, I could not figure out how to find it. Everything on the ticket started to scatter right in front of me, like everything was moving about, and I knew I was in some trouble then, but I had no idea how much. And so I just gave it to another friend and said, I can't see it, so if you don't mind, tell us how much we owe. So then I go home, straighten up, get into bed. The next morning, very early, I called my doctor's office, let them know what happened, and they wanted to see me that afternoon. So, I scheduled for that appointment. And by the time I woke up that next morning, my eyes started to be very blurry. All of my vision started to just blur. The headache was still there. The out of body was still there. It's like every day I was getting a new symptom. And I did go to the appointment. They were overbooked. They were actually trying to see if different ones could leave and come back. And I wanted to leave because I can get impatient sometimes and I don't like sitting. And they said, no, ma'am, you have to stay. You have a concussion. You have to stay for examination. And so I went in. My doctor is amazing. He tried to connect me with some concussive folks at one of our local hospitals, and he definitely confirmed that indeed it was a concussion and that I needed to make an appointment to see the neurologist. So I'll stop here and kind of marinate on that. And I don't think I missed anything that was marked about that time, but sometimes it gets fuzzy and I'm like, oh right, and then this happened, but I think I got everything. So I'll stop here for this submission, and then I will just move forward into, I will kind of say, milestones for each successive admission. But I will say that I'm a little over a year later, and again, I developed a new symptom every day, and part of that was also losing control of my motor skills. And so just to be able to talk, sometimes I get fuzzy, and sometimes I take longer to think about what I'm going to say because I'm nervous I'll say it wrong. But I'm just grateful to be able to speak honestly. I stuttered. That was the next phase of things, and then I'm filling out paperwork, which I'll get to it, where I can't see what's going on the page. It's jumping around at me, and then I get frustrated, and the more frustrated I got, the more the stuttering came and the more the tremor came. So there was much more to come. So I welcome you to come on this journey with me. It's a journey of a lot of ups and downs, and I'm still on that journey. But I hope through some of my experience, I can encourage someone else to lift their voice and not be afraid to tell your family what you're really experiencing and not what you want them to know, because because people can't see your illness, they think you're faking. And or because the only reference point they have to concussions, were their favorite hockey or football players, and they got right back out there and played. It's no big deal. But in real time, it is life changing, it is life altering, it is mood altering, it is spirit altering. Everything about you as a human being changes. So I hope you'll follow along with my journey, and hopefully as I continue to grow and heal, even if it's not in the physical manifestation, but even just my esteem and things that have been affected since PCS. So thanks.